Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the JTM Community Podcast, where we are building a community you can bank on. I'm your host, Jason Melvin. If you are watching this on YouTube, you already know who today's guest is. If you are listening, you might not know just quite yet. We'll get into that here in just a second. Of course, if you are looking to touch base with me for advancement advising, you can do so at j-tm.community/podcast, where you can also put in your vote for our upcoming topics. There's a new topic and poll that goes live every Monday. So a new episode and a new vote goes live every Monday. If you want some additional resources for the Mount Pleasant, Michigan area or national resources, you can also find them there on the website. Also on the top right of that are all the social media links for YouTube. If you're wanting to watch the podcast, Spotify to listen, you can listen right from the site itself. Also the business Facebook, which is where you can get additional updates, live updates. The polling and voting is there. It's a lot more convenient than having to go to the website, of course. So go ahead, like, subscribe, join, follow, all of the things to make it a little easier on yourself if you're interested. Of course, send us your feedback, your stories, your questions. Again, you can do that through Facebook or right through the site there as well. Without further ado, today we have our friend and frequent flyer to the podcast. I should actually check it out, Will. My guess is you've probably joined me for, I'm guessing, at least a third of our podcast.
I would say that's probably accurate.
When we're done, I'm going to check it out. It's got to be really close to that. So, y'all, you just heard me say it. Our friend Will Squires. So he is a husband. He is an athlete. He is a bit of a nerd, and I mean that in the most wonderful way. I too am such. And lastly, he is a teacher.
Lastly, yeah.
Trying to do us justice today and not fall into our old habit. So today's topic is the topic y'all had voted for, which is celebrating failure. Actually, super excited for this one because it kind of goes against the grain of what most people think of if they haven't been exposed to that idea before. So, Will, when you hear that premise, celebrating failure, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I always go back. When I think of celebrating failure, I always go back to the light bulb. Like with my students all the time, I go back to the light bulb and say, you know what? Thousands of times, it was like somebody tried to create things to create an alternate light source for us. Thousands of times, and the one time that it was good, but they had to keep going and celebrating their failures to make sure that they got to that success. So just making sure that you always think of things, try to look at things in a positive light, especially with job opportunities, and then life goals in the same way. No matter what, you have to look at it as in a positive light and go, what did I learn from this? Not, thinking to yourself, oh man, I suck, but looking at how you actually achieved more and you went out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the previous episodes, the content or topics, I feel fall under this, whether it's talking about things like the idea of opportunity versus problem or resilience or a lot of those things. And I think what it boils down to is if you can understand that every failure is one step closer to the success, right? Every time you learn that, hey, this doesn't work, right? Then you're going to course correct and make an adjustment. If you don't, then at that point it's deserved.
Yeah, as long as I love that point that you just made. As long as you course correct or change, like we talked about in a couple times ago when I was last on, we talked about making sure that you don't do the same thing over and over, expecting different results unless you're willing to change yourself, and that's or change what the process in which you're working. So you have to be able to course correct, as you say, and make those different changes to keep going forward and not to get stagnant, not to get set back.
If you don't, then it's failure without purpose. It's failure without growth. It's failure without learning. And I feel like that's the true fear, right?
Yeah.
Where people
that's everybody's fear.
Oh yeah. When people get caught up in the idea of failure, and myself included, it had taken me a long time to have the understanding. And it doesn't mean the anxiety about failing goes away, right? So if you're investing in a thing, whether it's your time, your energy, your money, whatever it is, right? So going to school, going to work, joining a program, whatever it would be. If you have a level of investment in there, it's okay to have a level of anxiety about not performing to the degree that you wish you could, or not having the outcome, right? And that little bit of anxiety can push your performance to do better, to prepare more, to all of these things. The fear, the catch-22 with it is when those things become it keeps people stagnant. So it's out of that fear, so they don't try that thing.
And I've been totally like this before, like in certain parts of my life where I just don't trust myself enough, where I don't trust my skills and trust my abilities to push through something. And I've found myself doing this before, but there's also been those times where I've said, you know what? I know what I can do, and I want to test it to see where I'm at. And that's when you get to go, okay, it didn't kill me. And I learned something new about myself. And so I can add that to what's going on in my life and continue pushing forward. So it is that double-edged sword.
Oh, yeah. I think if people can understand that failure should be the expectation, right? So I'm going to try this thing for the first time. I've never done it before. Like even if it's close to something you've done, but you haven't done quite that. So skiing versus or ice skating versus rollerblading, right? Similar, different.
Yeah.
So when I've rollerbladed all my life, that's actually bullshit. I have not done that.
I have.
So but then I put a pair of ice skates on and I'm biffing it, right? And
because you think you think, oh, it's not that much different. They're inline stuff. Yeah, here we go.
And I'm shitting on myself. Like, I should be better. I should, like, all these things. For some reason, the actual logical, like, rational idea of I've actually never done this thing before. So I'm learning as I go. So I fall 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, right? And I keep, but I'm slowly getting more duration in between each fall, right? But I still keep continuing to fall. And in those moments is when people start to shit on themselves. And a lot of us give up.
They do. They really do. And you always try and put my teaching last. And I'm going to go to it right off the bat, because it's where I see all of my students kind of struggle when they come into my classes, because so much of education has become, we can't let our children fail. Our parents telling us that that we're the best at everything, and kids don't believe that they can fail at anything because mommy and daddy said, you know, I'm amazing and I'm perfect. No, nobody's perfect. Anybody who tells you you're perfect is lying to you, because nobody in their right mind is perfect in this world. You can work towards it, but you can never achieve it in terms of actually being perfect at everything.
Oh, sure.
You can't be, because there's always going to be somebody better at it, but then you're going to be better at them at something else. But our students come in going, well, why didn't I get an A on this? I got an A in 5th grade or 6th or 4th grade or 3rd grade. And the parents ask the same thing. Well, why didn't they? Because they're not perfect at it. They're practicing it. They're learning new things, and they're not proficient at it yet. They're not mastering it yet. They're learning. That's what school's for. You learn, you fail, you practice more, you get better, and you achieve. That's what it's all about.
Mhm.
But nobody understands that anymore. They just were like, well, my child should be getting all A's. Why? Because you say they should? No. They have to practice and fail first. And if they don't fail, one of the first things I love telling my students in the beginning of the year, and I keep reminding them that every single solitary time that I get a chance to, is it is okay to fail. Well, what about failing tests? Okay, that's a great question. You should have had plenty of time to work with the material, practice the material, ask questions about the material, and work towards understanding it.
Mhm.
If you're failing a test, which should be the end cap of your, like where your knowledge should be at the end of a unit or a semester,
Mhm.
then we have a problem. And either we have to go back and look at all of the different things. Did you get enough feedback? Did you try your hardest?
Mhm.
Did you go and do the work that we asked you to do on the side to make yourself better? If those are all yeses, then we really have a problem. If those are no, then you know exactly where the problem is. And it's either in the learning aspect, the learning piece, or where you go back and actually do the practice yourself.
Yeah, even a failed test is a lesson learned, right?
Yes, it still is.
And it can be learned from all sides. So in that case, that student, if they failed the test, what is the lesson? Did you study? Did you do the things necessary? And it's honestly answering that. So just because you had YouTube going on a second monitor while you were like studying, but you really weren't, like you were reading the words, but your mind was on the video, like that, you weren't studying. It takes that objectivity, and sometimes it's not necessarily on the student either, because it could have been the format of the test you created. It could have been on the time limitation, right? So the test was longer than the students had time for,
and it could have been the way that myself or another teacher was going over the material. It just wasn't the way that the student needed to hear the material or practice the material. And there's so many different things but those are pieces that you can tweak.
Yep.
So
and that's where the value is.
Exactly. You learn about how you work. Can I work with a second monitor? No, I should always be focused here.
I need no distractions.
Right. Should I work with my headphones in a room where I'm still listening to TikTok videos on my bed while I'm trying to work on my homework? Probably not. Now, if those TikTok videos are informational, like your teacher's using it to show you what's going on, and it's that way that they're getting the information to you, great. But you shouldn't have anything else distracting you. And some people can and some people can't, and you need to know what works best for you. But that failure will tell you something about it.
Just as much as the successes do. So when that student fails that test, they make some adjustments, and they're successful in the next test. Now that success has highlighted the things that are conducive for them performing well.
Right.
And what people also forget is, just because I'm doing a similar act, so one test compared to another test, they're both tests, but they're not the same. It's the same thing as rollerblading and ice skating, right? So what I do to perform well on a test in this course could be very, very different than to what I need to perform well on a test in another course.
Absolutely, because you should be able to understand yourself and go, well, I like this material better, so I'm going to pay attention to it more. I have students that love math compared to ELA, which is perfectly fine. I'm an English and social studies teacher. So the students that come to me and go, Mr. Squires, I just really don't like reading or English. I understand that. But then I know exactly where I need to go with them, because I need to work harder with them. I need to give them more things that are going to get to their different learning processes, and make sure that whatever I'm doing, I understand that this student needs more from me, because they're not as interested in it. They have to put in more as well. But I can also do things that make them more interested in the material and get them more excited about what we're learning, instead of just going, okay, well, they don't care about it, so I don't care about what they're doing. That's not what I'm there for. That's not my job. I have to move with the student to create that success. And if we don't do that, if they don't move and I don't move, then it's always going to be, well, you failed. Why? Well, because you didn't do anything. And then it's always blaming that, and then never moving forward.
Yeah, there's no course correction.
No, none.
repeating it over and over. So in a situation, whether it's yourself, with students, family, friends, it doesn't matter. Situations that, so failure only truly has the greatest lessons and value when the failure is authentic.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Oftentimes people, whether they know it or not, they'll self-sabotage. So an athlete performing in a competition, but they ate like shit and drank the night before, or a student who has final exams, but they choose not to study, or you're going to work, but you were up the night before and had to get up early. So you're operating on 3-4 hours of sleep, right? All of these things. And then when the failure happens, they put
it on that.
Yep, on the situation. So it loses its value.
It does.
How have you in moments throughout life navigate that in a level of honesty so that failure is still beneficial?
Well, everybody is, like we were talking about, not everybody is perfect. We're working towards perfection. We're working towards trying to get to that, to a better person. And so I've had a whole bunch of times in my life where I failed, and I've done that same thing. I blamed other things. I blamed the people. I blamed the situational elements to it. But it's honestly gone back to a couple of the things that we've talked about in the past. It's honestly come back to calling myself out and having my close friends, you and our other group that we have, out on our bullcrap. And when people actually pointed it out, when I would talk to them about the situations that I was struggling with and failing with, and then I would start doing that lack of course correction and that blaming of other situations or other elements, and not myself, not looking internally at myself and going, what did I do, or what can I do next time to not have this outcome? I started noticing it more myself. So it started off with a group effort where people helped me see the differences and see the things that I wasn't noticing. When I was just saying, no, it was this caused it, and people would go, no. You did it this way, and you could have done it this way, or you could have gone to sleep earlier, or you could have, and it's the same thing that happens all the time. You just have to be called out on it a couple times and be okay with learning that you're not perfect. And that's what I'm trying to tell myself is, everybody goes, oh, don't talk negatively to yourself. True. But you can also say you're not perfect, so you're not faultless. You can't say that you have no fault in any situation, because there's certain places where you just have to. But it took people calling me out on it to learn that I had to look deeper at myself first and go back through the entire situation and be more be more third person at it and look down on it like a impartial person at the whole situation before I started tossing blame around.
Yeah, to be able to see where your contribution to the situation was.
Exactly. I mean, you could go through job interviews, you could go through trying out for sports teams, you could go for any number of things that people go through in their lives, and you can always blame them. Well, the other person was older and they just don't understand me, or the other person was so young they didn't want to have somebody working for them that was older and more experienced. You can toss out all this stuff, but no, what was your contribution to it first, and look at that first. And then if you can't find any or much fault in that, then you have to tweak those other parameters.
Oh yeah. And it's important to be mindful as well. There's situations that you'll have been in and will be in where you can do everything perfectly and still not get that job.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Because there's like I said earlier, there's somebody that's better than you. There's somebody that's more experienced. Or
even if they're not, it's a better fit for that.
It's a better fit.
Company.
Absolutely. Personality, mindset, experience, whatever you want to go with.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that going through my master's, we had a discussion about different things for HR, hiring practices and things like that. And it was different terms that you use to say that somebody's not good enough for a job. But some of the ones that you should not use, especially their age, just say they're too experienced means you're just too old.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe kind of possibly, but there's groups of people and there's companies that use these terms and they say you have too much experience. Because if you say, no, I'm sorry, you're just too old and you wouldn't understand what we're trying to do here, you'll get sued for it.
Oh yeah, it's illegal.
And so they use all these terms and the people come back frustrated. And they're like, I'm not too old. Like, because that's what they feel. They're like, no, they just think that I'm old. And but it might be, just like you said, not a good fit, but you have to put a reason behind it. And I feel bad for those people because they always come back going, well, what was it about me?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it was nothing about you other than the fact that, other than the fact that there was just somebody who was a better fit.
Yep.
And you cannot take everything so personally.
Yeah, I think it's important to at least give yourself the moment to self-reflect so you can find if there are things that, I could have done this better, but not to have, not to force that to be true, right?
Mm-hmm.
In an ideal world, people would just be comfortable being honest with each other, even in the sense of interviews or employment or friends or hobby, and in all areas. I mean, that's where really healthy, in-depth, valuable relationships are built. But we can't do that because the risk of, well, I'm going to course correct. So I'm speaking my true belief. You can't do that out of fear of, I don't know how to word it in a way that is appropriately honest.
Are you going fear of legal repercussion?
No, because legalities are easy enough to navigate for sure, but it's the fear of someone being offended.
The fear of offending somebody.
No, that's what I'm avoiding, because you can't offend anyone. You could say the most. Being offended is a perception of a word or an action. The word or the action itself isn't offensive. To me, it doesn't matter what anyone says. You could say the world's most fucking heinous shit to me, and I'm probably gonna laugh. Probably. Coming from you, I am. I'm like, that's 100% certain. One, I'd be shocked and remarkably amused if it came from you, because I mean, you have the heart of a
Care Bear. Don't get on that. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So, by the way, last episode with Will was on the premise of confidence, and part of that was compliments. So he's still working on that. Just
still working on it, just a little bit.
But that very thing, like, there's this fear now that if I say this thing and it's perceived a certain way, that's gonna do me harm then. So there's this like perpetual cover your ass approach. So
it's not really a perception anymore.
No. Well, it is. It's just a punitive perception. So you can perceive me doing something and take offense to it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if that thing wasn't objectively, logically true, but you can treat it as if it is. You can put it out in the world and in social media. And the punishment to me would be as if that were true, even if it wasn't.
Exactly. Yeah. So the perception that other people get, then they put their words and comments and thoughts behind it.
Mm-hmm.
That's creating this whole thing of, well, no, that's not how it was meant to be. But when it gets pushed out there from somebody who's better known or has the right amount of yelling or
the clout or whatever.
Or the clout, exactly. It's just, it turns people's blood just so insignificant that they don't pull themselves to do that.
Mm-hmm. If I break,
they can't, because they're worried about the repercussions.
Yep. And if I break this, hopefully make it kind of cut and dry, the idea of being offended
Mm-hmm.
and how perception is the focal point. So if I say this thing to you and it's and you feel offended,
Right.
what isn't accounted for is your life experience is what led you to filter it in that way. But I can't account for your entire life.
And that's where people get lost, is because the person who hears it and gets offended
Mm-hmm.
automatically goes, well, that's offensive to me because of all this. Well, I'm sorry, that's not in my purview. Like, we can't know everybody's situations.
Most people don't know their own.
No, yeah, exactly.
Right?
Most people don't know their own. So how, like, they don't know it until they know it, and you
But
just
they
go,
hold
oh crap.
but they hold other people accountable for their shit, which again, and I'm
Yeah.
not saying there's not things out in the world that people do or say that are just like hate fueled. Absolutely, those are things, right? And people do things and say things to be harmful, but there's a difference between the intention to do harm versus the intent to offend, right?
Right.
Somebody could even try to do harm to you and it not do harm because of your ability to gauge and navigate your level of resiliency, the dark humor that you have, all of those things. Go ahead.
No, but that just brings it back to, like, the thing that we were wanting to get to is, you have to, the failure piece,
Mm-hmm.
when you share those failures, and you share a failure that somebody else takes offense to, or you share a situation that you're in and you fail at it, they're like, well, why couldn't I did this, and they start jumping on you. It's because, I'm sorry, you might be better at that than me.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't judge somebody just based on a situation in their life, because you don't know their life. And so it is about that perception, but then leading to that whole degrading of their entire experience, just because of the fact that, oh, well, that's not what I can do. That's
Yeah.
not what I'm.
They didn't meet your standard, and that perception, which is really long way to get to the idea that I had in mind, is how we were talking about being offended and how that's perception oriented. That's for ourselves as well. And when we don't have that self understanding, that's why so many folks shit on yourself when you don't get the result doing that thing. Is all your life experience in the baggage that comes with it tells you all of those messages. I'm not good enough. I didn't X, I didn't Y. I should have but couldn't. So it's a judgment to my character.
Or it comes around and it makes you, like you said earlier in the discussion, it makes you come around because you fear all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It stops you dead in your tracks and doesn't allow you to push forward. So just the fear of the perception of other people. Well, I'm not going to go do this job interview because, they might not like me. I'm not going to go to this performance to try out for because they might not like me. I'm not going to go to this basketball tryout because I'm not as good as everybody else and they're going to make fun of me.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares? Apparently you do too much, but that's where that perception of having to be perfect at everything has killed our society and has made it so difficult for people to understand that failure is that good thing. Like, if you tried it, you failed. Okay, change it and get better, or don't go towards that thing anymore.
Yep. I've been having, as you say that, it triggered a lot of thoughts for me. I've been having a lot of conversations with mostly friends and family lately. There's a lot of folks been struggling with various things that has been going on in their lives and trying to navigate. And one thing that I've noticed is so many people have this, their value is externally validated. So all of these things become so much more impactful, and they struggle because if I have a thing in mind and like this is a goal or a passion or an interest, right? If it's not theirs, they can't see what you see.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're relying on them to make that thing that you're interested in validated and valued, right? You're setting yourself up. It would be like um trying to measure air, the quality of air with a fishnet.
Yeah.
Like those two things, like they don't have the instrument that is
None of the
needed,
proper tools.
yeah, to measure the thing that you're trying to gauge,
Yeah.
but all your value is on the way they view it, right? Just like
Well, you spend all this money on this net thinking that's what's going to give you the proper, and you're like, wrong thing, people.
So you're hearing and you're feeling all of these things, right?
Yeah.
Versus being objective enough to say, I don't know everything. In fact, I don't know most things.
I'm right there with you.
So if somebody had asked me a question, if I don't know, like I'm gonna gauge that and have that kind of conversation.
Right.
But we don't have that same belief otherwise. So we're trying to value a thing based on what everyone else is saying, and that leads them to inaction, right? Is because I'm not going to be Michael Jordan, so I'm not going to go like play for this. Is we are so result oriented that the value for the process and the value for the failure tends to be gone. So, and I was the same exact way as I was prepping for our conversation today. I was trying to think of the moment where that did the most harm. And at the time, I thought it was a boon and a benefit. And it was through conversations, through people I was engaging with and friends, where I learned that the very thing I thought was helpful was hurtful. So when I went through the counseling program and did practicum, so practicum is, for those who might not be familiar, is you're getting a hands-on experience, but it's in a very limited sense. So it would be with
days a week,
maybe, recorded or watched by a supervisor, because you're learning the skill based. And the in this case, the people I was working with, they're well aware of like what that situation is.
Yeah.
So it goes from that to what is called an internship. So you're actively working as if you were finished and licensed ultimately,
and you're actually doing the job. Absolutely.
Doing the job. With there's oversight and whatnot because you're still in like that interim level. But throughout that, I relied so heavily on the education, training, and professionalism that it made that process was not very approachable. It was not very human, right? So, which is actually the stuff that infuriate me now. And working, so where I do private practice for a long time, it's also an educational place where we take interns and whatnot. So, helping them learn from my mistakes has helped them to progress much faster over time. Because you don't hide behind the professionalism, the bullshit that you say, the jargon, like all of these things. But because I was so insecure and worried about failing, I hid behind that, like to a flawless degree, which was actually very, 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 very hurtful. In the sense that it made it difficult for folks. And then as I once I understood that and continued to challenge myself, whether it was through trainings for their education, engaging with difficult clients, whatever that would be, what I learned is I can use all of those things and still be Jason in the process.
Yes.
So it's not uncommon that I use humor throughout, or as a practitioner, I still swear. Right. And there's folks that would be like, hey, like, that's not a thing that you should do.
I do that.
Like that. Will I course correct it? Absolutely. If I'm
Yes.
working with a young child, am I swearing? No.
No.
If I'm working with folks who are in there and I can tell, get a decent gauge for whether it be faith related or otherwise, where swearing might actually be hurtful, then it's not that I have the inability to not, right?
So the question comes back to, did you learn that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, were you able to learn that through failing in trying to different times?
Oh gosh, yeah.
And that's exactly what we're trying to talk about
Yep.
is you learned how to work with people and gauge yourself and gauge them
Mm-hmm.
by failing in the beginning.
Yep. And if I said, and it happens all the time. So Tracy's mom, Judy, right? This is a lot safer, right? Like there's no repercussion of me messing that up. So
Right.
we've been together for a long time, and like I swear, no surprise to you or probably anyone listening to this podcast at this point, especially if they made it to this episode.
I never noticed.
It used to bother her, right?
Mm.
So she now she laughs and she'll give me shit back and whatnot. And not that I'm trying to like corrupt or taint anyone, as much as it is I'm appropriate. So if we're in a situation like where that's really not okay, but typically I say it because it has meaning or humor, right? Like those,
Yeah.
That's the level of aspects that fuel my everything. It's either funny or it's purposeful.
And that's the interesting thing is that you bring up the relationship piece, and people don't think about failure in relationships based on like your personality and things like that. But I've hidden some of my personality from my in-laws, and it's not, they know it's there, but because Rachel goes, whenever we're home, you can't curse in front of my mother. And then as soon as her mother says a curse word, she's like, okay, now you can say that one. I'm like, wait, I can say it whenever I need to, but you're just saying I can say it now. It's really interesting because you always like, especially when it comes to relationships and partners, especially when it's a significant other, you always are like, well, no, I want to show the best side of me to the people who are going to be trusting me with their, you know, with their child, with their person, not child, but, you know, with their
their loved one. Yeah.
Yeah. With their loved one. Thank you. Not to sound all creepy and weird and stuff, but because every parent still looks at their loved one as their kid. My mom still calls me her little boy all the time, and it's
mildly creepy. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just that's how parents always look at their children, is they always will look at you as their child no matter what. So you always want that the person who you're trying to take that responsibility from and show them the best person that they're going to get. And so like for the longest time, my in-laws had never heard me curse. And one day I was just so frustrated with things that were going on outside of our relationships and outside of our situations, just school in general and things that are going on in the education world. And I just popped off and started, you know, blank this and that. And my mother goes, I've never heard you swear. And I go, yeah, it's because of her. She's always told me I've had to be appropriate in front of you. And this was like 3 years into our relationship. And so it really kind of, the fear of not just failing somebody else. Like I was fearing failing my soon to be wife at that time because we weren't married yet, and giving her parents a bad look of me.
The funny thing,
oh, they don't really care. They think it's funny, but they don't want to hear the curse words, but they think it's funny. But it's like, I don't want to do that.
This kind of has gone full circle because we kind of started this conversation at the idea of offending, which that comes through the premise of judgment. So she was worried that you would be perceived in a way that would cause judgment on her or you or your relationship or whatever that would be, and the impact that would have.
And she still to this day doesn't. Like, she still to this day will not do that around her mother. Her dad, yeah, because dad's a little bit more kind of laid back and chill. But mom, she's like, no, we can't curse in front of mom. And she still will not until her mother does it first. And then it's like, okay, now we can go. Mom used that word. We can. So
when every once in a great while, Judy would swear, right? And I don't, maybe this is the twisted part of me, which I'm sure there's many, without question, there's many, and not that I'm sure. It gives me so much joy. And again, not that I'm trying to like taint or corrupt anyone, and I don't believe swearing to be that, but when she does, it's so
over, like it's so out of left field, you would say, like unexpected. And
yeah, well, it's kind of a surprise. It's like when a little kid swears, but the joy that I get is seeing the relief for her, right? And it's usually followed by some kind of story, or she'll talk about Larry, who's Tracy's dad, and her husband. So she'll like usually like have a story of like how he viewed swearing, which was that it's a necessity in life ultimately, right?
Sometimes it is, just to get that out.
Like bringing that back to this idea of celebrating failure. So first, the most important thing that I think we're touching on is being objective about the failure.
Yes.
Being willing and wanting to actually learn from it. And I would argue there's not a failure that's been in existence that hasn't come with its own message or opportunity to learn. It's been whether or not we are receptive to that. Even like the most heinous shit. So if we think of the Holocaust, right? People may choose like there's nothing to learn in there. No, there absolutely is. There's a whole lot to learn about humanity and how you treat each other, and what are red flags when you start to see like the premise of corruption or tyranny, and like how can people come together, and the ability to survive that very thing and not have your human spirit like just outright demolished and hate the world. And like there's an infinite amount from something so terrible. And if there are things to be learned in that, then you're absolutely right. When I go to an interview and I don't get the job, is there something that I could learn? Absolutely. I get to be disappointed. Absolutely. I can be frustrated. I can be all these things, but let it have a purpose, right?
Absolutely.
Be objective, be willing to learn. Like, what about that? And maybe what you learn is you find out more about that company, and oh no, that wasn't a good fit for me. Wouldn't have been a good fit for me. I can see how I wouldn't have been for them, right? There's so much in there. So I want to do have a candid conversation on what does celebrating failure actually look like. And we're not just talking about learning and growing. We're talking about celebrating failure.
What is it? Well, I think celebrating failure is really difficult to just put in a box. Especially because we've already gone over the topic of, everybody's different. We learn different ways. We do things differently. So my celebrating failure is going to be a deeper understanding of myself after I go back and reflect through certain things. So I went through when I went through my master's program for educational administration, most everybody in my group, I think there were only a couple of us that did not, but most everybody in our group, within a month or two of getting our degrees and having that posted to our credentials so that we could actually be seen as possible candidates for administrative positions, almost everybody else went out and interviewed for school leadership, deans, vice principal pools, to just get into the pools to be a candidate for them, not even to just get a job, but to get into the pool to be able to be viewed as a candidate.
Like the application before an application.
The application before the exactly. And I didn't do that. I still haven't, because almost 2.5 years later since the time that I got my master's degree, because I didn't feel like it was the right time I felt like doing that would have me getting myself out of the classroom.
Mm.
And it showed an end to my teaching career. That's what I felt like in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I look back on it, and now that I reflect on it, I look at it and I go, no, it's like you said, it's just the application to the application. It's just to see if at that time that you're prepared to be thought of
Mm-hmm.
at a higher position as a candidate for administrative positions.
Yeah.
And I turned myself away from it because of the fact that it felt like it would be failing my students, failing what I wanted to do, failing my life goal of teaching for 25 years and then going into administration for maybe the last 5 or 10 years of my career because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for it. But sometimes you're not ready, but the right situation comes along that makes you ready. And I was fearful of that. But after all of the time that I took to reflect, to journal about it, to talk to my loved ones about it, yeah, I failed because I should have gone in and at least put myself out there. But what did I learn from it? That I still feel like I need to do that soon, very soon. I need to do that by the end of this year to make sure that I give myself a chance to view my possibilities in the future.
Yeah.
And I have to make sure that I keep myself up to date on everything because now it's 2.5 years. Things in administration have changed by leaps and bounds because of all the COVID stuff we've gone through.
Yeah.
And the administration that I knew before COVID isn't what it is now. There's still similarities, but because of all the different things that they have to jump through, now I don't feel like I'm incredibly qualified. So I'm still doubting myself, but knowing that I have the skill set to do this job if I so choose to. But if I want to, not if, somebody else wants to. And I have to just put myself out there and take that. But it took me a long time to look at it and celebrate it and go, yeah, I failed that. That was a bad thing. But I learned from it because of journaling and all the different things that I was able to do and talk through.
Yeah,
that's a roundabout answer, but
no, you've been able to really see the growth. And what I hear you saying now is because of that, you're able to celebrate what had happened, and that has fueled you to make the decision to change that. And I would argue, because you mentioned like failing the kids and all of these things, I can understand that sensation.
Yeah.
Right. I would also argue that anytime, and myself included, I've had the same sensation. It's actually that almost identical to why I got into counseling. Story for a different day, but I want to focus on what you just said, and that is that sense of failing the kids. My argument would be, you think you know better than you think you know best in how you could service the people or the children that you care about. What if you put yourself out there and you find out that you can support, you can be there, you can facilitate an environment to tenfold the success rate, tenfold the supportive rate for these kids compared to being in the classroom with them.
And that's one of the things that a lot of people pointed out. They said, you have so much more, you can. The way you present yourself, the way that you build the culture of your school, even if it's the vice principal or, one day being a principal, you have the chance to impact so many more students. But when I say failed the students, that what I mean by that is I won't be able to, the only ones that I'll really be dealing with, and I've seen this over the last few years, over my entire career, of certain principals and administrators getting stuck on just knowing the students who are getting in trouble.
Yep.
And not celebrating the kids who are doing good, strong things in the school. And it's not anything against my administrators now or in the past. It's just that's what education tends to become because we have so few resources. So that was one of my biggest fears of, I can make a bigger impact in the classroom if I focus on my 64 students, my 32 here and my 32 in this class, and I get to know them. I get to be a part of their lives and support them, compared to, okay, now I have 800 or 1,200 at some middle schools. Kids that I have to get to know, because that's what I want to do. I want to know every student. I was at a school of 600 right before I moved up to middle school, and not knowing everybody, but I knew about 75% of the entire school. I could tell you first graders' names, kindergartners' names, and I was an upper grade teacher, so I barely got to see them. But the thing that made that possible for me is because I would go outside or up front or into their classrooms and help when I had time off, or do things when I had time off, so they got to know me and I got to know them. I don't know, because you're an administrator, you don't have a lot of free time. How that would look. So I feared that, but looking at it now, my the principal that I have currently, he makes it a purpose to be out in the hallways every single solitary break. And I know that you're going to be like, well, should be the normal. And sometimes it's not for most people, but for ours, he is out there. He is standing in the hallways. He's talking to students. He's high-fiving them. He's asking questions about their family and how they're doing and all the situations. He is one of the quintessential people that I look to when I come to start thinking about going to this next level. Because he has that student focus and like what I want to do.
It really sounds like the two of you are similar in that way. And he accepted the fact that I have a lot more kids now in a lot less time. So how can I take these aspects and values and virtues that I have and make it worthy in this position? So his way to do that is to be present when things are happening. He's there, he's out there, he's having conversations, he's high-fiving. I believe you said he.
Yeah, and this is where the celebration piece comes in. And I know it's taken me a long time to get to it, but
I love it
because of that, because of all the different things that I've done for, going back and looking back on my career, looking back on what I want to, looking back on how I didn't jump into the pools right at the beginning, and then seeing that I still have so much support from my administration and other teachers that go, why aren't you up there? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you, it's a little bit of like help to get me like, okay, well, I know I failed it in the past, not going out for it. But if I do it now, I feel like I'm actually more prepared because of all the reflection that I've done and all the extra support that I've gained because of my leadership, not just as an in-classroom teacher, but going throughout the building. And it's just nice to see that other people believe it too. So it's that false sense of affirmation, like that you need that little pumping up just to get yourself going. But it's a celebration for me because I wasn't even thinking about it for another 10 years. But
absolutely. I truly feel both within what you just said, as well as any encounter really, where we have it a little bit backwards, and this very, very small tweak makes the world of a difference, at least has for me. And I hope that the people that I engage to this capacity with, and you also fucked up by telling me that story. So that means the rest of this year, what's going to happen.
Yeah. Hey, have you signed up yet? Have you put in for it yet? Hey,
because the celebration isn't on the result. It's on the attempt.
It's on the journey. Yeah. It's on the journey through, and whatever happens at the end happens, but it's all about the journey and learning things about yourself. So
absolutely. And no matter the result. So I get so excited, which is where I'm fueled by working with folks, whether it's been advancement, advisement, or through counseling. Within my personal life, Tracy recently doing some really, really hard shit personally. And like, anytime there's any attempt or effort or change, I express truly how proud of I am. I was talking to Mason yesterday. Mason is our mutual friend and good buddy, of how proud of Tracy I was. She wasn't even around, but
Right.
like,
You do it just it's not because you have to and because she's in the
no.
next room and she can hear you and she's going to go, oh, yay. You do it because it's a genuine fact. And that's what I love about you. You don't bullshit around.
Mm-hmm.
You literally just go straight to it. And if it's what you're feeling, you speak it. And that's what, and especially with this stuff, that's what I appreciate because, yeah, you messed up. Okay, cool. Thanks for telling me. Now, how can I help fix it?
Now this is going to be so much better, like so much better, right? The in her the family
Tough
nephew,
times lately.
like there's been a lot of things that have been going on, and just through that acknowledgement of like the sense of pride for them and the risk that they take, and they're just putting themselves out there, you just see like so much growth. And that I'm doing none of that growing, right? I'm just
No, it's
acknowledging
all
what
on
they're
them.
doing.
You're just an observer.
But so much when we're trying to do these things, and there is no there's no affection or value put on the risk taken. It's the result gain or lost, right?
Yes.
So, and anytime somebody like pushes and it could be the smallest thing, I get so excited. So my little nephew Josiah, I didn't know he had been in Taekwondo, had started a little while ago. Didn't know that. And my sister the other day had mentioned that she had taken him. I was like, oh shit, I didn't know. So then she started like sending me a video and whatnot, and like immediately like elated, but like fucking get it, dude. Like just that, and not that he has to be like the greatest person that has ever like participated, but the fact that he's trying it.
Exactly. And that's one of the, I love that you brought up Taekwondo for it as well. Any type of martial art, any type of skill in general, you practice, you mess up, you learn how to do it better, and you come back and do it again. And that's exactly what Taekwondo is working with Josiah.
Yeah.
He's coming in and he's not great at it. He's practicing, he's screwing up, he's learning how to do it better because he has the teachers and other students that are working with him, and they'll do sparring on it soon and teach him how to do the different forms. And then he'll come back. If he keeps going back, he'll come back again and do it again. And he'll mess up and he'll make mistakes and he'll change it. But every time his form will get better. Every time his sidekick, his sidestep, roundhouse, they'll get better. But that's because he's putting in that work and he's understanding that, yeah, I'm not great at it, but I can get great at it if I start working towards it. And you cheering him on, that's even better.
Like, and it's just out of being excited.
Yeah.
And I think you put it beautifully, which is a really good way for us to end our conversation today, because it's so tangible, is I think anyone who is probably 30 or old, no, because they remade it, and Cobra Kai. So you stop it, using the Karate Kid, right? So the very premise of a martial art discipline, right, is truly celebrating failure. It is you do this thing, you fail, you learn how to make the adjustment, you course correct, and then you persist, and then you get better. And as you do that, you start to progress through belts. You start to progress through that whole system, which is a tangible way of celebrating your failure. It is literally, you did the work, you made the failures, you adapted, you learned, you overcame. Boom, here you go.
Yeah. And just to kind of finish off of that, but kind of use another sports one. I was watching, I don't know how much football people watch with the group that's watching right now, but college football, they just had their playoffs, and we're going to have the championship in the next couple of days. The Georgia coach, when they asked him what made their season and what kind of showed them what they can expect in the national championship, because they're heading to the national championship against one of their big rivals, Alabama, he just goes, they beat us. When they beat us, we learned, because they hadn't been beaten all year, we learned what we need to fix. If they wouldn't have gotten beaten the entire year and then gone up against the same team in the championship game and gotten beaten because they didn't know their flaws, they didn't know where they were weak, they wouldn't be able to course correct in time. And now we get to see exactly if they are able to this week. And that's it. It kind of goes with the same thing. Is just, you have to be able to fail. And he didn't look at it as a bad thing. He's like, yeah, we lost, we didn't like it, but we found out where we were weak and can change the process.
And that is, and hopefully that leads to a better game.
Hopefully, yeah.
Again, that very idea of celebrating failure. So first, I want to thank you, as always, for joining in and having a conversation. I always have so much fun. You tend to get me fired up in moments, which
well, you do too, if you couldn't tell. So
hopefully that transitions well and doesn't just make us look like a couple of psychos. I want to end. I want to end this with a personal challenge to anyone that is watching or listening. And we will partake in this as well, because one, I enjoy the growth, and two, I'm going to help motivate you to do the thing I know you already want to do.
There's a lot of things I want to do, so
I just get a little joy at being a pain in your ass. So it's a win-win for both of us.
Looking at me.
Is to give some thought to either a risk we've taken recently or a risk we will take, and celebrate the fact that we did or are willing to do it. Don't make the celebration and growth contingent on result, but on what we learn in the process, the celebration and the fact that you had the courage, the bravery, the discipline, the motivation, though whatever, to take that step.
And don't, like you were saying, don't be afraid to fail. You've got, if people in your life don't support you, and I'm talking to the people now, not just between us, but if people in your life say, well, God, why didn't you do this? They're not necessary. I'm just going to say right now, they're not necessary. If they're not there to support you and say, hey, no, you failed, yes, but let's look at the positives at it. If they're not there in a supportive manner, because that's what friends do, that's what families do, what they're supposed to do, just be okay with failing. And know that you have not just have your family and friends, but you have this community that will back you up and will help you look at things. Share your stories with Jason. Share your stories on Facebook with him, and allow us to help you through. Allow him to help you through, and to give his ideas of how we can be better, how you can do something better. And not just him, but everybody connected with the community.
That was the only thing I was going to change, is our ideas.
Our community, yes.
Again, thank you so much, Will. For those watching, thanks for tuning in and enjoying. As Will just said, send in your information, your questions, your concerns. You can do that at j-tm.community/podcast, or you can do it through Facebook. The link to everything upper right-hand side of the website. If you want to touch base with me for advancement advisement, you can do that through the website as well. Additional resources are also located there. Last plug from having a recent engagement, a bit of a partnership with Veterans for, as in the number, USA. They do excellent things, especially through this holiday season, supporting vets, specifically with homelessness and trying to help manage and get them back on their feet. They do things where vets can get free haircuts, and they're constantly doing beautiful work. You can check them out. I encourage anyone who has a little bit of flexible ability to support to check it out. If it touches your heart, cool. There's no obligation, nothing there. And of course, if you're enjoying the content, you can check us out on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, the website itself. Like, follow, subscribe, do all of the things to make it more convenient for yourself. Continue to vote, send in your information. It is literally the bloodline that makes this whole thing work. As always, thank you for being part of a community where you belong and you can bank.